What's going on, everybody? Welcome on into the Matt Lombardo Show presented by Heavy Sports. Of course, I am Heavy Sports Senior NFL Insider Matt Lombardo. Great to have you here. Hope you and yours had an incredible holiday season. Hope Santa Claus left all the presents from your list under the tree, and certainly a couple of teams across the league woke up on Christmas morning to playoff berths of their own. A lot to get into on what's going to be a really fun show. We have a couple of great guests lined up for you. Buffalo Bills All-Pro edge rusher, future Hall of Famer Von Miller is going to stop by and talk about what he has going on now that he is sidelined for the season and the roller coaster of emotions that went in from suffering an injury on Thanksgiving, thinking that he dodged the bullet of a torn ACL when it turns out he is in fact done for the year. Then we'll switch things up. We'll talk a little bit of college football, preview the college football playoff, and look into some of the teams that are on the rise in the college football landscape with ESPN college football analyst Desmond Howard. Really looking forward to those two conversations. But before we get into it, just a little bit of housekeeping as always. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, Spotify, SoundCloud, toss us a like on YouTube. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please go ahead and leave us a 5-star review. Let us know what you like about the show, maybe what you don't like, and a guest or two that you'd be interested in hearing from, and we'll go and try to get them on. Those 5-star reviews, they really help grow the show. And you look at the Buffalo Bills, they entered this season with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations, in large part because of the addition of Von Miller, and he did not disappoint prior to the injury. What an exciting conversation this is going to be. We're joined by Buffalo Bills edge rusher, future Hall of Famer Von Miller on behalf of Doritos. Von, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm great. I really don't have any complaints at all.
You know, that's great to hear. And, I see you got the new triangle haircut and you were part of a tailgate hosted by Doritos. Tell us about the haircut, the triangle, and I got to hear about this tailgate. I know Bills Mafia is out of their minds. Did they have you try to jump through some tables?
No, I haven't jumped through any tables, man. I've had this haircut, this ducktail for a long time, and it's super cool that they call it the Eye of Doritos and Frito-Lay, and for us to partner up and create the name that triangle campaign, and it gives fans around the league to kind of give their own take on my haircut, to empower them and strengthen them to really give their own take, on my haircut. And the coolest ones and the dopest ones, the coolest haircut that we see, we're gonna give them, 2 tickets to Super Bowl 57 to see the Buffalo Bills play somebody in Arizona. So it's super cool to team up Doritos all because of my haircut and the triangle haircut. I think it was a long time coming, and here we are.
See, there you go. You're already thinking Super Bowl, and rightfully so with that roster that you guys have in place. And I know that you went to Buffalo chasing another Super Bowl ring, coming off of being instrumental to what the Rams were able to do, winning the Lombardi last year. What attracted you to the Bills in the first place? And I know you said it took a while for it to feel like home. Does it feel like home in Buffalo finally?
Yeah, man, it does. And I think Marv Levy, he said it. Don't quote me on this, but I think this is right. He said, nobody wants to come to Buffalo, but nobody wants to leave. And that's exactly how I felt. Coming here, being around, the wonderful people of Western New York, and, being here in this environment, it just kind of grows on you. Like it's, to see the gray clouds and, the snowy weather and the rainy weather and the wind. I think it's just an indicator of what type of people that we have here. We have hard-nosed, tough people, tough, smart people here. Doesn't matter if it's hot, cold, sunny. Like, we're all about playing football. We love the Sabres too here. We're all about great football, the Sabres, and of course the Buffalo Bills, man. And that's what brought me here. On top of that, we got Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, great defense. Coach McDermott is great. Brandon Beane is one of the best GMs in the league. The infrastructure of this team is one of the best infrastructures that I've ever seen. Meaning, the front office ladies, the ops people, the cafeteria workers, the janitors, strength and conditioning staff, athletic training staff. Like, everybody's all in on helping the Buffalo Bills be as successful as they possibly can. And that was the reason why I came here.
And this season certainly didn't end the way for you personally that you would have hoped, obviously. And it's got to be an emotional roller coaster. Thanksgiving, you get the injury, you get the initial report that it's not an ACL, but then you wind up being out for the season. What has that been like for you? And how are you dealing with all of that and that range of emotions?
I think, 75% of it is mental. I think 75% of it is mental, and I'm in a great space mentally. Um, I just choose to focus on the positive perspective of my life. I'm in a great position. I'm part of a really great organization. I got one son, he'll be 16 months in 2 days, and I got another son that'll be here in February. Um, I'm here for 6 years. I was supposed to be here 6 years anyway, so I got multiple shots to come back and try to be the best player I can to help us go win another Super Bowl. And I just choose to look at the positive things, the blessings in my life. And of course, whenever you hear news like that, it's the reality and the facts. Like the reality and the facts are always going to be that. The reality is, I'm injured. But I honestly feel like your attitude towards the facts is more important. The way you view it and the way you go about it, that's more important than the actual fact itself. So,
and you
I'm
obviously
feeling
are in a
good.
situation where you have a quarterback, even though you're injured this year, and you're going to get multiple bites of that Super Bowl apple in coming years as long as Josh Allen is there. You
But
practice against Josh every day. You've been up against him. You see him every Sunday. What makes him the MVP of this league this year, and what makes him special?
um, they say that the MVP is, you break it down as the most valuable player, like in the whole entire league. And it's not anybody that does it like Josh Allen. We got great, quarterbacks all around the league, but nobody does it like Josh Allen. Nobody's able to, run around and find a open receiver and hit him like that and just change the game for one player. Of course you got, other guys that's in the race as well, like Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. But Josh Allen, he's gonna heat up. He's gonna heat up again, and he's gonna take over that race. Here we still got 4 weeks left. He's gonna take it over. We need him deep in this last stretch of the season. We need him deep into the playoffs to go win a Super Bowl. We can't do it without him, and I think he's going to show people exactly, the type of player that he is, with these games that we have left in the season.
And another key player for you winning that Super Bowl ring last year was just in town, a week or two ago, Odell Beckham Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Have you put on the full court press? Are you recruiting Odell to wind up in Buffalo with you, with those gray skies and that snow and the Sabres?
We gave, when Odell was here, we gave him the very best recruiting trip that you could possibly have, in Orchard Park. And I just think, the ball is in his court, and, I think I don't want to speak for him, but, you should choose health, over everything else. And whenever he's ready, he's going to be back. Like whenever Odell is ready to go, he's going to be back. And I'm not trying to speak for him or do anything like that, but, I love Odell on and off the football field. And he's, whether it's this year or next year, whenever he chooses to play football and, be Odell Beckham again, it's going to happen. No question about it.
Odell Beckham or no Odell Beckham, this is still a team capable of making a Super Bowl run. What makes the Bills the favorite in the AFC? You're around that building every day, even though you're injured. You've obviously been around the league for a long time. What makes the Bills the team to beat to go and get that ring?
They say Super Bowl, they say defenses win championships, and it takes a great quarterback and great offense to get there. And we got all of that stuff. On top of that, we got at least 4 or 5 head coaches on this staff. And we got another 4 or 5 head coaches that will be head coaches after that. We got amazing front office. We got amazing infrastructure on this team. And I think that's why the Buffalo Bills will be successful in the 2022-2023 season.
And, one last thing for you. I know you're here on behalf of Doritos. How can fans enter the Name That Triangle Challenge? What's up for grabs? How can they find out more?
They can, we'll get everything, back to you. But I think post it online, post it on Twitter, post it on social media, hashtag Name That Triangle, and boom, you're into it.
You got to get the triangle haircut, hashtag Name That Triangle, and you're in the running for some Super Bowl tickets. Von Miller hopes to see the Buffalo Bills. Von, appreciate the time as always. Best of luck with your rehab, and we'll talk to you further up the road.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Great stuff there from Von Miller, of course, brought to us by Doritos. And you look at the Bills right now, I think they really miss Von Miller. They went from being one of those teams that you looked at as a super team, as a Super Bowl favorite, in large part, and I've said this before on the podcast, and I've written it in previous columns on heavy.com. The next evolution for the Bills wasn't just what they're able to do on offense with Josh Allen and with Stephon Diggs and with Isaiah McKenzie and all of the weapons they have. James Cook emerging as a budding star, a future star to watch in 2023, in my opinion. But what they've been able to build on that defense this year, and you saw the game-changing, game-clinching plays that Von Miller has made against the Kansas City Chiefs number of times throughout the course of this season. Losing Von Miller and losing that element on defense, at least in my opinion, it makes the Bills a little bit more vulnerable. It makes them a little bit more beatable, especially when you look at the landscape of the AFC and you look at a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, who's playing the best football of their season. Joe Burrow legitimately playing himself, not necessarily maybe to the front of the line, but very close in the MVP conversation. You look around the NFL, of course, Patrick Mahomes playing some of the best football of his career. The Chiefs just continue to find ways to get it done. The Miami Dolphins, I know that they've stumbled a little bit here, and that was a really brutal loss on Christmas Day against the Green Bay Packers in a game that they had to win, in a game that they should have won against a team that they should have handled easily at home, but they lost. But the Bills, to me, are no longer invincible without Von Miller. And I think that they struggled a little bit against the Bears in the elements. They got it right. They won 35-13. They really turned a corner late. But I think that Von Miller and missing Miller, I think it knocks them down a peg in the AFC hierarchy. But four teams that weren't knocked down a peg are the four teams that made the college football playoff. You have the Georgia Bulldogs and Ohio State Buckeyes, TCU and Michigan. Four great games, as well as some great matchups in the New Year's Six Bowls that are coming up. And joining us to talk about all of that and a whole lot more, ESPN college football analyst Desmond Howard. This should be a great conversation. Joining me now to talk all things college football playoff, a little bit of NFL, a little bit of Michigan football, a little bit of Big Ten, and a whole lot more, ESPN NFL analyst Desmond Howard on behalf of Modelo. Desmond, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Happy to have you here. And before we get into it, I'd love to find out more about how this partnership between you and Modelo came about, especially ahead of the college football playoff.
Yeah, I tell you what, well, as a college football analyst, the one thing that we talk about on a consistent basis is the fighting spirit of the fans. I mean, we believe that the college football fans, they're the most, they're the most celebrated fans in all the sports because of their passion, their fighting spirit. Like, they change games. There's no doubt about that. I can give you a list of games I was at personally this year when I saw just how the fighting spirit of the fans change the game. So we talk about the players, but the fans should be recognized and celebrated too. And Modelo realizes that. They understand it. They get it. So we have the full-time fan contest where one lucky fan gets a grand prize of going to the national championship game. And then check this out. I get to hang out with the fan because I helped pick the fan. So I'm looking forward to that too. And then they get like a six-figure salary for watching college football games. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. And it's just Modelo doing their part in recognizing the importance of fans and the fighting spirit that they bring to college football.
That's unbelievable. And there really is nothing like college football, the atmosphere. I'm a Penn State season ticket holder, so I'm up there all the time, especially the whiteout big games like that.
Ridiculous. The whiteout at nighttime is ridiculous. You get it. Yeah, you get it. For real. Absolutely.
I've left my vocal cords in Happy Valley a few times. Let's look ahead to the playoff a little bit here, Desmond. Georgia obviously enters this thing as the defending champion. Feels like they're the deepest roster of the four. Are they the prohibitive favorite in your opinion?
No doubt about it. Yeah, without a doubt. They're the consensus number one team in the country. I mean, they've been playing, they've had some moments during the season where they didn't look great, but they found ways to win the game. I mean, it's a long season, so you're not going to be dominant every time you take the field. But to their credit, I mean, you got the bullseye on your back. When you're the defending national champs, every time you take the field, you're going to get your opponent's best shot. So with that being said, yeah, they're the prohibitive favorites. Listen, they play Ohio State in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. I mean, that it might as well be in Athens. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's like a home game for Georgia. So they have everything in their favor at this point. And obviously Stetson Bennett, the quarterback who won, was the quarterback of the Bulldogs a year ago, is back. He was a Heisman finalist last week up in New York. So it seems like they're the prohibitive favorite.
And a team that's not involved but is always a part of the conversation is Alabama. And really an off year for Nick Saban, kind of an uncharacteristic season. For second time they've missed the playoffs since 2019, second time ever. What's the future hold in Tuscaloosa, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. I can't even believe they still got a football program there, right? They lost 2 games. They're not in the college football playoff. I mean, it's like Armageddon in Tuscaloosa. Listen, they're going to be fine. I mean, they lost 2 very, very close games, both games on the road. Tennessee played their hearts out at home. It was a back and forth game. They lost in the last second field goal. And then, the LSU game, Baton Rouge is a different place, man. We talk about the fighting spirit of these fans. Yeah, at night, Baton Rouge, Death Valley is just a different monster because of the fighting spirit of the fans. So in another close game, Brian Kelly decides to go for 2 in overtime. So I think they're going to be okay. It's just 2 close L's they took on the chin, on the road. But they still, recruit very well. Nick Saban has not forgotten how to coach. I think that they'll be okay.
And, kind of along those lines, Bryce Young and Will Anderson, they're both going to be top 5 picks in the draft, but they're both going to play in the Sugar Bowl. So that has to say something about the culture that Nick Saban is building there. Do you read anything into that when an era where you have so many star players and incoming top draft picks, opting out of these non-playoff bowl games?
I'm glad you brought that up because that's so rare. It is so rare that we see guys who are top draft picks playing these, bowl games that what do they really mean? Like, what do they, they're not playoff bowl games. They're just regular bowl games, so to me, it says a lot about that program. And it says a lot about the culture that they have in Tuscaloosa under Nick Saban, that these players who are high draft picks decided, hey, we're going to go out there. We're going to finish it. We're going to finish what we started with our teammates, with the guys we started with. So hats off to Bryce Young and Will Anderson Jr. and just for Nick Saban and the program that he has. I think that speaks volumes to the program that they have down there in Tuscaloosa. I'm glad you brought that up because, like you said, we always see the opposite. Like I'm always looking now at my phone to see who's opted out this week.
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to play, who's not going to play. And, your alma mater at Michigan, something seems to have changed dramatically over the last 2 years for the Wolverines and for Jim Harbaugh. Second straight year, they blow out Ohio State in the game. Yeah. Second straight year, they win the Big Ten, go to the playoff. Yeah. How did they turn the corner? What has been different about Michigan these past 2 years?
Well, I think people underestimate the big job that Jim Harbaugh had to do when he went to Ann Arbor as the head coach, as far as just trying to turn around the program and change a culture. Like it was a lot of work he had to do. And, he did the best he could with what he had, but then he started to bring in different coaches. And I believe that the assistant coaches that he brought in, that they were the difference makers. And, he had to change his perspective. Like there was a lot of adjustment that went on during, his tenure so far as the head coach in Michigan. But you look at the assistant coaches he brought in, and man, you're looking at let's try this on for size. Jim Harbaugh loses Josh Gaddis, who was the Broyles Award winner a year ago as Michigan's offensive coordinator. He went to Coral Gables, become the OC at University of Miami. Then he loses his defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald. He went to Baltimore to become their defensive coordinator. So now you're looking at a guy, he lost maybe 3 first-rounders on defense, lost, Hassan Haskins, a couple other guys. Right. He brings in, he brought in Jesse Minter. He hired Sharon Moore from within to be the OC, and Sharon Moore has done a fantastic job. Jesse Minter was a Broyles Awards finalist. They've just done an outstanding job of helping create this culture where they're developing players, they're coaching the hell out of them, and they're doing just a really, really good job of keeping that whole culture going.
And the Big Ten is really fascinating to me overall. Obviously, you have Ohio State and Michigan in the playoff again this year. And Michigan's winning the league the last 2 years. But as we said at the top, I'm a Penn State guy. What do you make of the Nittany Lions and James Franklin? How do they close the gap on Ohio State and Michigan? And when you look at the young talent, the Drew Allers, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, all that talent on offense,
Yeah.
how far away are they? How close are they to closing that gap?
I tell you what, the game in Happy Valley against Ohio State, without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, if number 44, JTT for Ohio State, didn't have the game of his life,
yeah,
I really do think Penn State would have walked away with a victory that day. I just think that the way the rhythm of the game was in Penn State's favor. You even look at the beginning, I mean, it was like either 2 or 3 interceptions early on, but at the same time, Penn State was still in the game, if not winning at halftime. I think they were winning like 14-13 at halftime. They were still winning, as bad as they played in the first half. But like anytime Ohio State needed to play, it wasn't Marvin Harrison Jr., it wasn't CJ Stroud, it was JTT, number 44, who, when that game was over, he was the clear MVP of that game. Without him having the game of his life, I do think that that gap would have been closed, and Penn State probably would have won that game. So I just don't think the gap is as big as people think. I think that James Franklin's doing a really, really good job. They got some young talent, like you said, who's going to be exciting to watch. I tell you what, I can't wait to watch them in the Rose Bowl against Utah. That's going to be a really good matchup. We'll be out there for that game. Very excited to see them go up against the Utah Utes.
Should be a fun game to watch. I want to switch gears to the NFL real quick here. As a former wide receiver, Christian Watson, he's really been a revelation for the Packers this year. A little bit of a slow start, but he's caught 7 touchdowns over the last 5 games, couple 100-yard games over that stretch. What makes him special from what you saw of him in college and maybe watching him in Green Bay this year?
Well, I tell you what, Christian Watson, you know, as a receiver who didn't come from an FBS, came from North Dakota State. He to me, he embodies that fighting spirit that a guy who comes from a lesser program, who doesn't have as much recognition, that guy has when he's going up into the NFL now against like these, you know, I guess better known receivers who went to Power 5 schools, but the fighting spirit that he shows, that he goes out there with. And like you said, man, listen, I remember the first pass, it was like a clear touchdown, and it was in the breadbasket from a first ballot Hall of Famer, Aaron Rodgers, and he just clearly dropped it. And, you know, I think it affected him mentally, as it probably would most young receivers. But I believe that Aaron Rodgers and the guys, they rallied around him, they kept his spirit up, and eventually he was able to come out of that shell and then show what type of talent he has. I mean, he's a guy who, when I was talking to other scouts preparing for the draft a year ago, like they were really comparing him to like a Randy Moss type guy, like really big, extremely fast, great hand-eye coordination. And now we starting to see how he can affect. Now that's a big comparison, because Randy was like
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Hall of Famer, just a physical freak. But you know, he has similar measurables and similar tools, and I think the sky's the limit. Now, obviously, we don't know how long Aaron Rodgers is going to be there, so he got one of the best trigger men right now, but he ain't gonna have him much longer. So it's gonna be really curious to see how he plays after Aaron Rodgers move on, whether it's next season, 2 seasons, whatever.
And speaking of quarterbacks, if Desmond Howard is the GM of the Houston Texans or the Seattle Seahawks, or one of these teams picking 1 or 2 in the draft, who's the number 1 quarterback on your board coming into this spring?
That's a great question. I couldn't answer that right now. It's a really good question. I would have to look at the names and then try to figure out what the strengths or weaknesses are, and then try to compare that to what the offensive system is at those places. So it's a really good question, but not one I can answer right now.
Of course. Now, do you have any sleepers coming into the NFL draft, guys who you've seen this year that might not be getting the pub, that they could be high risers that are going to become household names as the draft approaches?
High rise. Let me see. Any sleepers? Man, oh man. I haven't started my NFL prep. I gotta get through this national championship game first. Then I'll start my NFL prep. So
who do you like in the playoff? I know you're a Michigan guy, so obviously the heart has to be pulling for them over TCU. But who do you like in the playoff? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, well, every alum wants to see his team, his school win a championship, right? So obviously I would love to see Michigan win it. But It's gonna be tough. TCU's gonna be a tough team, man, in the Fiesta Bowl. I think that Max Duggan, who was a finalist, who came in second place in the Heisman voting, he's a resilient dude, man. Real, just a fighter. You learn his story, all the injuries he's going through. Wasn't a star at the beginning of the season. Hung in there. Didn't hop in the transfer portal. Wanted to be the best teammate he could be. Got the opportunity to start once the starter got hurt, and the next thing you know, he's in New York as a Heisman finalist. Really resilient team, a lot of talent. It's going to be a nice battle between them and Michigan and Ohio State. Listen, Jim Knowles is a guy who people in Columbus and other analysts, they said that he was brought to Columbus specifically for the Michigan game. And they got embarrassed. I mean, like it was a failure defensively. So this is now an opportunity though for him to go up against the #1 team in the country, and if they can, have some success against Stetson Bennett and that offense with Brock Bowers, who's like one of the best players in the country, then it's going to be interesting to see, if that defense can hold up against them, and then the Michigan loss doesn't look as bad at that point. But if Georgia goes out there offensively and, they run up the numbers on the defense, then it's going to be interesting to see the conversation between Ryan Day, the fan base, and Jim Knowles.
And one more time, Desmond, you're joining us on behalf of Modelo. How do you choose the full-time fan winner? How do people win?
Oh, yeah. So it's me and a few other folks, and we get a chance to we read whatever they submit and look at their stories, and then we decide a winner.
He's Desmond Howard. He's brought to us by Modelo, picking the full-time fan winner ahead of the college football playoff. Desmond, always appreciate the time. It's always a great conversation, and look forward to talking to you further up the road.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I look at this playoff and I think that it's Georgia's to lose, right? I think that Michigan is built to beat you a certain way with the physical defense and running the football. Ohio State, they're a team that can outlast you and beat you late because they have so much talent, and they're a team that is built to win on the perimeter with speed. But I think Georgia is the most complete team. When you look at the defense, the versatility in terms of beating you through the air, on the ground, they, of course, have a championship-winning quarterback. They have a championship-winning program that has the experience of being in this moment. They're not going to be overwhelmed by the moment. But these are the games that I'm really looking forward to. And one of the games that, to me, was an absolute statement in the NFL last week was what the Carolina Panthers did to the Detroit Lions. And the Lions were a team, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, going into that game, going down to Charlotte. I don't know that they could have come out any flatter than they did against the Carolina Panthers. I don't know if they took the Panthers lightly. I don't know if Carolina just had the blueprint with the running game. But as far as the Lombardo Trophy goes for this week, it goes to the Carolina Panthers backfield duo of Chuba Hubbard and Devonta Foreman. What a game these two had. It was the kind of game that put them squarely in the mix to go to the postseason. They're one game back of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they finish up against the Bucs and against the Saints. So very real postseason aspirations with interim head coach Steve Wilks. The performance that backfield in Carolina had on Sunday was one of the more dominant ground games that we've seen all season. Devonta Foreman, 165 yards and a touchdown. He averaged 7.9 yards per carry. Chuba Hubbard, 125 rushing yards, averaged 10.4 yards per attempt. 10.4. That is domination on the ground. There was something very clearly that Carolina saw in Detroit's defense that they could beat them at their own game. Because we know the Lions, having watched them, especially when they get down in the red zone, it's all about the running game. It's all about that offensive line winning up front. The Panthers dominated in the trenches the entire game, and they were rewarded for it. And that was a Lions team that they were very much in the mix for an NFC wildcard going into that. And I look at Carolina, if you can keep doing that, if you can run for over 300 total rushing yards in a game, they have a de facto playoff game coming up on Sunday against the Buccaneers. That's one of those where if you win, you're alive, and if you lose, that's probably going to be it. And they close out against the Saints. So the opportunity is there for Carolina to make the postseason with an interim head coach. Will be one of the more impressive turnarounds after trading away Christian McCaffrey, after trading away Robbie Anderson. You look at what this team has become over the second half of the season with Steve Wilks. He's more then coached his way into the conversation of losing the interim title and keeping the full-time job, especially if they make the postseason. How do you move on from that? And I think they have a good chance to make the playoffs, the Panthers do, especially if their ground game continues at the level that it was on Sunday. Let's go to the pick of the week. And this is another one of these late season de facto playoff games down the stretch where if you win, you have a legitimate shot of making the postseason. It's a de facto playoff game for the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are playing some of their best football of the season. They're getting tremendous quarterback play from Trevor Lawrence. You're seeing that they are a well-coached football team making big plays in big moments of games by Doug Peterson, who's a Super Bowl winning head coach in his own right. They've won 3 in a row. They've won 4 of their last 5, and they finish off their regular season with 2 division games against the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans, with a real shot to win the AFC South. And I think that after you saw Ryan Tannehill go out with an injury for the Tennessee Titans, and they're playing a backup quarterback at this point, the way that Trevor Lawrence is playing, the Jaguars are the team to beat in the AFC South. Even when he's not perfect, like he wasn't in miserable conditions against the Jets last Thursday night, he's still playing the best football of his career, and he's keeping the Jaguars in games. Look at the results. He's thrown for 1,415 yards with 11 touchdowns to just 1 interception over this 4-game span for the Tennessee Titans. He's just dominating right now. And the biggest question mark about Trevor Lawrence going into this season was ball security. Can he protect the football? Can he limit the turnovers? But in the biggest games, the games that matter most down the stretch, Trevor Lawrence is playing the best football of his season. I like the Jaguars in this one. They're 4.5-point favorites in Houston against the Texans. I think this is at least a touchdown win for the Jaguars. This is a really fun show. Thanks to Von Miller for dropping by, Desmond Howard for all of the insight into the college football playoff, the New Year's Six Bowls, some great college football talk. Thanks, as always, to Thomas Darrow behind the glass, doing a tremendous job, instrumental to getting this podcast up and running each and every week. Once again, if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, Spotify, throw us a like on YouTube, and leave those 5-star reviews in the Apple Podcast Store. They really do help grow the show. Some great games on tap, division races going down to the wire. Can't wait to break it all down next week. I'm Matt Lombardo. I'll talk to you after these games on Sunday. I'll talk to you next week on the Matt Lombardo Show, presented by Heavy Sports.